This hangout is on air. So I'm here with the Squamish Chamber of Commerce, and we're talking about a culture of service today, and with world-renowned customer service and customer experience expert Shep Hyken. And the reason I asked you, Shep, to join our chamber session is if you could tell your amazing story about the taxi cab driver and how it relates to a culture of service.
Sure, I'm happy to do it. And by the way, the guy in the front row there, you better smile for me. I'm talking to you. So, all right. Well, let's go ahead and get started here. Before I tell the story, I want to give you a quick little setup on it because I think that's very important to have some context as to where it's all coming from. Also, as great as this is in this format, you can always go on YouTube and just type in my name and you'll get the live version in front of a large audience of this story. But let's go ahead and give you some background to set this up. So years ago, and especially in a culture of service is very important, Jan Carlson, the former chairman or president of Scandinavian Airlines, was brought in to turn around a failing airline, and it was losing millions of dollars. And he managed to turn it around with a concept he called the moment of truth. And he defined the moment of truth in any business is whenever a customer comes into contact with any aspect of a business, they form an impression. That's the moment of truth. It's interaction that you have with the customer, with the guest, or in his case, a passenger. So I said, that's great. He said they can be good and they can be bad. And I said, well, there's actually a third way. They can be in the middle. They can be average. They can be satisfactory. Now, the good moments of truth I call moments of magic, and that's important to remember as I get ready to tell this story. The bad moments of truth are moments of misery, and the ones in the middle I call those moments of mediocrity. And our goal is to definitely not be average or mediocre, definitely not be negative and have complaints and problems, but to try to create a moment of magic, which is basically any experience that's better than average. How much better than average? Sometimes it's just a little bit better than average. But overall, it's consistently and predictably at least a little bit better than average. And at the end of the day, that's what the best companies and organizations do and are. They're just consistently a little better. And once in a while, when there's a problem and there's a real opportunity to step it up and do a wow level type of service experience, at that point they do. But otherwise, they're always just a little above average. So with that in mind, I'm in Dallas, Texas. And this is many, many years ago. It's hot, it's humid, and I'm walking out of the convention center wearing a business suit. And I've been on the road for 2 weeks. I'm looking for a taxi cab to take me from downtown out to the airport. And it's about, 25-minute drive out to the airport. So out jumps the cab driver that I walk up to his cab, and he's there to take my bags. And he looks at me, and I look at him, and he was like wearing shorts and a T-shirt, and he had messed up hair. He hadn't shaven in what looked like a week, and for all I know, he hadn't showered in a week either. And I look at this man, and I think to myself, this is a moment of misery. And why? Because I'm looking at him, I'm thinking, what's the inside of that taxi cab to be like? You know, it's dirty and grimy in there. You know, there's no air conditioning. It's going to be very hot. I'm going to be sweaty. By the time I get out to the airport, 25 minutes later, the suit's going to be wrinkled and sweat for the, trash for the day. And about the time I actually get out of the taxi cab, a little spring's going to pop through the vinyl seat and rip my pants as I get out. That's when this guy said in his deep Texan accented voice, sounded nothing like the man that I was looking at. I can't get as low in a voice as he could go, but he said, get the cab. It's nice and cool inside the cab. I'll take care of your bags. And he smiled, and it didn't look right. It definitely didn't sound right. And so I did what he said, though. I handed him my suitcases, and I opened up the door, and cool air hit me in the face. And it was cold inside the taxi cab. The air conditioners were working just fine. And I looked around. It was spotlessly clean. And on the seat next to me, neatly folded, were 2 newspapers, the local Dallas paper and the USA Today. And in the middle, there was a hump with where the hump is. There was a bucket with ice and a couple of sodas. And I looked around, and I was amazed. And I had to look back to make sure that guy was still putting the bags in the back of the cab. So he gets into the front seat eventually, picks up a dish of candy off the front seat, a small dish of candy, turned around, offered me a piece of candy. That's when I remembered what Mom used to say. Don't ever take candy from strangers. And this was a perfect opportunity to do so because it was a taxi cab. It seemed like a safe place to do it. I now violated all the things that my mom and dad told me not to do. I took the candy and I asked this guy, is this like your cab, or are you like borrowing it from someone for the day? And he looked at me rather strangely and he said, it's my taxi cab and you make yourself at home. Newspapers are yours to read. Take them with you at the end of the trip, no extra charge. The sodas are yours, again, no extra charge, and have as much candy as you'd like. And he said, by the way, it's a $22 flat rate, which is the same rate that any honest cab driver should charge you from here out to the airport. I thought to myself, this guy's pretty good. So we get onto the highway, and he asked me a question that no taxi cab driver has ever asked me before. He asked me, are you in a hurry, or is it okay if I do the speed limit? So by that time, I'm reading the newspaper and I'm drinking a soda. I said, just take your time. And we're starting to talk a little bit. And as we're heading out there, he's asking me what was I doing in Dallas, and what did I do for a living, and where do I live. And then he asked me if I'd ever seen the famous fountain at Las Colinas. And I said, I'm not sure what you're talking about. And he described it to me. And I said, you know what? I've seen a picture of that fountain. And he said, then you've got to see it in person. I go, really? He says, yeah, it is right on the way to the airport. It's not going to cost you any extra money. It's the same $22 flat rate that any cab driver would charge. And it's just going to take an extra couple of minutes because it's right off the highway. And it's not only the most beautiful fountain in the entire Dallas area, it might be the most beautiful fountain in the entire United States. Would you like to see the fountain? And I said, show me the fountain. So I was excited. He was excited. He's kind of moving pretty quick now. We pull off the highway, and there it is. And for those that aren't familiar with this fountain, it's statues of horses, and they're galloping across water. And these statues, where their hooves are hitting the water, it's kind of splashing up, and you can sense the energy and motion coming from these statues. And it's in a big, beautiful office area. If you didn't see these big buildings, you'd think you were looking out at the prairie, watching these horses run across a river or a creek. Anyway, we get back into the cabin, and we're on our way back to the airport, and he asked me for a business card because he said he collects the cards of the people that he drives, and we exchanged cards. And he told me that the next time I come back to Dallas, I should give him a call. Don't wait until I get there, but call him 2 or 3 days ahead of time. Let him know what time, what airline, what flight number, all that information. And he said, I will be waiting for you. I will park the cab outside, I will come inside, and I will meet you when you go to get your bags. He says, when you walk over to get your bags, I'm going to be standing there with open arms, ready to help you out. He said, don't worry, you'll recognize me. And I thought, you can count on that. So we get to the airport, it's $22. He gets a huge tip, not just a few dollars, but quite a few dollars. And I couldn't wait to come back and do business with this guy again. And the reason is it started off to be a moment of misery with that first impression. And people ask me all the time, come on, why did he, with so much great service, how come he dress that way? Now, I might have slightly exaggerated, but I will tell you, the man is a very disheveled looking man. You can comb his hair and put him in a tuxedo and he would still look that way. You could shave him at 7 in the morning, at 8 in the morning, he looks like he's got a 5 o'clock shadow. I mean, the guy is just, he just looks that way. But once we got past that first impression, he not only managed the moments of truth, he created these moments of magic. He had the newspapers, he had the sodas, he took me to see the fountain. I mean, I couldn't wait to see what we're going to do the next time, when I came back to Dallas. Maybe we're going to go to a baseball game. I don't know. But you get the idea. And this, none of this really cost any extra money, because it turns out that he picked up the newspapers from somebody, a hotel that had leftover newspapers that the guests didn't take. So none of those newspapers cost him any money. The sodas, he said, as I got to know him, cost him about 25 cents or so. And he said, I give somebody a soda, and they give me an extra $2 on the tip on average. He goes, you do the math. And as I got to know Frank, I go, that's pretty cool. So it was a great way. He knew how to take advantage of making that customer happy, because that customer is going to tip more. And the trip to see the fountain didn't take anything but a little bit of extra time. And sometimes that's all we need to do to make that customer, that guest, really appreciate us, is just to give them a little bit of extra time. But the best part of the story happened 4 days after this trip, when I was home in St. Louis, Missouri, which is where I live, Go St. Louis Blues. Okay, I didn't mean to say that to all my good friends up there in the Vancouver and that area up there. I know. So now I see you guys are smiling at me. This is good. But no, in St. Louis where I live, I got my mail. I opened it up, and there was a thank you note from my cab driver, Frank. A thank you note from a cab driver. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. How many of you, raise your hands, if you've ever received a thank you note from a cab driver? Nobody is raising their hand. Every Christmas I got a holiday card from Frank and his wife. Now, Frank is retired and doesn't drive a cab anymore, but during the time that he drove a cab, he drove the cab the same number of hours as everybody else drove their cabs, who, you know, the taxi cab drivers. But the difference was he didn't really have to wait in line for his customers. He would wait outside of a building, or he'd wait outside of the airport and go in and get his customer instead of wait 2 and 3 hours at a time sometimes. I got lucky that day. He had just dropped someone off. He was heading back to the airport to pick up one of his regular customers. He saw me with suitcases. He says, that guy's going to the airport. I'll take him. And that turned into, for the next 5 or 6 years, the guy that I always used whenever I went to Dallas, Texas. And I think Frank understood the difference between satisfying a customer and creating an experience that would make a customer loyal and want to come back and do business. With those little bit of extras, the trip to see the fountain and the candy and the sodas and the newspaper, those little things that didn't take much effort, and especially, by the way, that thank you note. Now that may have taken a little extra effort, but today, you know, you can email somebody, you can pick up the phone, or you can see them in person. The idea is to show appreciation. I think Frank figured it out, and Frank, when it comes to great service, is one of my idols. So that's my favorite story about customer service. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I just want to thank you so much for your time. We're going to jump back into our session here. I know you're probably got a lineup of calls, and this is another example for me of a moment of magic to be able to connect like this and have you take some time out of your busy schedule to work with us in our small community. So thanks so much, Shep.
Well, thank you, Christine, and I am looking forward to getting back up in that area and doing some amazing skiing and you showing me the whole mountain.
Awesome. Promise.
All right. Thank you.
A whole crew over here who will come along with me this time.
All right. Sounds like fun.
Okay.
Thanks so much.